The only thing we can be sure of about the future is that it will be absolutely fantastic. So, if what I say now seems to you to be very reasonable, then I'll have failed completely. Only if what I tell you appears absolutely unbelievable have we any chance of visualizing the future as it really will happen.
Hello, and welcome to Arthur C Clarke Presents metaFUTURES, an exploration of what the metaverse is and what it may mean for the world to come. I'm your host, Patrick Coleman, and along with the Arthur C Clarke Center for Human Imagination and Origami Air Co, we're very excited to have you with us as we explore the limits of the possible when it comes to the metaverse. To begin our journey, if you want to follow me outside, we're going to get on an airship to our first destination.
Good evening. Hey, I hope you had a lovely Zephyr flight. Welcome to Liberty Forum here inside the beautiful community of Afterville. I am your host, Fidget, and co-hosting here with me today on the other end of this row of chairs is Patrick Coleman. And this is another episode in the Salon series, Arthur C Clarke Presents metaFUTURES. This time, we invite you to join us as we explore the themes of identity and community and really just what it means to live and work in the metaverse. Everyone you see here has been asked to chat with us on the subject of the meta of a plural multiverse. We've got some exciting panelists here with us today who we will introduce in just a moment.
Just got eaten.
But first, I'd like to tell you some cool stuff about my friend Patrick. So let's see here. So, well, most days Patrick Coleman can be found working in futures literacy as the assistant director for the Arthur C Clarke Center for Human Imagination at UC San Diego, where he has organized various futures literacy and arts and culture projects, including SD Futures and Afterville 2030, the VR community in which we are all immersed at this very moment. But also, Patrick's creative pursuits include an incredible array of works published throughout the poetry journal canon, and his novel The Churchgoer and a collection of poems entitled Fire Season have both been received with critical acclaim. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Patrick.
Thank you, Fidget. They haven't invented a blushing response for our avatars yet, but if they did, I would be blushing. But I am so honored to be with here. Oh, I learned how to use it then. Oh, I guess I have my emoji. There we go. It's true. But it's such an honor to be here with all of you, and especially, I want to single out Fidget Dione Surdez, who has been the director for this week's program. Who has done an amazing job. In addition to that, has a master's in the management of library and information services, and serves as the Afterville resident archivist and pioneer. Has been along on this journey for the last 2+ years and contributing in all kinds of amazing ways outside of the incredible work she does with the LA County Library and working as a teaching assistant in the digital asset management program at Rutgers University. So round of applause for Fidget. It's so great to be doing this with you.
Now I'm blushing. It's nice to have this opportunity to be in conversation with Patrick here in Afterville on the Liberty Forum stage. But thank you very much for that introduction, Patrick. That felt really good. But yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? It's just kind of strange when somebody introduces you so big. But now that everyone knows who we are, let's see who else is here for the conversation. Our 5 panelists today each come from their own unique experience and perspective, from acting to filmmaking to the art of foresight. We have co-founder of the Afrorithms Future Group, and CEO of Bison, the Best Innovation Story Network, and resident advisor avatar for the OAS Afrorithms Mothership, and a multi-talented creator in the world of film, and someone with a really, really hot mic. Actor Ahmed Best is here, everyone.
Hello, everybody. Hello, hello.
So, thank you, Ahmed, for being here. She received her doctorate. Excuse me. She received her doctorate of philosophy in the area of familial ghost stories. If you really want to bottom line it, one of the 10 pioneers of Afterville and Afterville's very own resident storyteller. Please welcome Dr. Jeanelle Horcasitas. Hey. Hi, Jeanelle. Cool. Okay. And so then, who do we have here? A cyberpunk from Earth IE2. He tells us that he's mostly human and that he makes the best taco in all the metaverse. I really want to check that out. In the Meet Space verse, he's a filmmaker and writer who believes that stories will become increasingly immersive and interactive. When he's not surfing dimensions, he's the host of the Simulation Nation Worldcast. Everybody, please welcome Johnny Android. Thanks for being here, Johnny.
Hey, thank you. All true. All the things you just said.
We'd expect no less.
I'll get my talk MRE in here, and we'll have our avatars have a little. Be good.
Little taco. I like it. Okay, so a world builder in the medium of film and social consciousness. You may know him through his films Totem and Concrete 49 that we all just recently took a peek at. Indigenous and resident filmmaker Justin Deegan, everyone. Hi, Justin.
Hello, hello, hello.
So nice to see you here.
Thank you.
And last, and certainly never of the least, he is a professor in strategic communication and foresight and our resident futurist who, by the way, is planning your and my ascent to the OAS Afrorithms Mothership as we speak. My friend and colleague, Dr. Lonny J. Avi Brooks. Yay!
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks, Fidget. Awesome. Can't wait to
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to that, right? So welcome, everyone. Yeah. Thank you for braving your headset, your laptop, and Zephyr transport to make your way to Afterville for what I assume to be a magical conversation on the meta of a plural multiverse. Patrick, I wonder if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to tap into your, I'm going to have you take a stretch here, tap into your inner Arthur C. Clarke and tell us a little about what he might have thought about our meeting here this evening in BR for this meta discussion.
It's a good question, and I'm always very humble to try to imagine what he would say about something because I feel like his mind seeds my own in all kinds of ways. But two things came to mind as I was thinking about tonight. The one, Clarke, who is known as a science fiction writer and a futurist, also invented the idea of the geosynchronous satellite systems that enable this kind of global telecommunications that allows us to be here today. So I think he would be pretty tickled and humbled by the idea that all of us are in different parts of the country. We have people coming in from other parts of the world enabled by this thing that first occurred in his imagination that then was built and made real in the world. And that's something that I think all the people here have in common, that their imaginations are doing incredible things in the world. The other thing that came to mind with Clarke is thinking about him as a queer man who later in life with post-polio syndrome was often confined to a wheelchair. There's something really, I think he would have really loved about coming into the metaverse where you inhabit a different kind of body, you have a different sense of what's possible, in the same way that he was an avid scuba diver because he thought that was the closest way he would ever get to experiencing weightlessness of space. And so I think, it would be fantastic to see what he would do in a space like this to kind of expand our sense of what's possible.
What an incredible opportunity for accessibility, right? Thank you for sharing that with us.
And so one of the things that we thought would be a good way to kick off this conversation here is asking everyone to talk a little bit about your kind of superhero origin story in the metaverse, and so what your first experience was like, and what you saw when you came in. I mean, we were just thinking about what Clark might see and what he might kind of take up. And so Fidget, just to kind of ground us, would you be able to talk a little bit about your first forays into the metaverse and what you saw as being a exciting sense of possibility there?
Oh, yeah, I mean, absolutely. We love a good hero story, right? I don't know how much of a hero I am, but I definitely love to share a little bit about my own experience before we kick this conversation toward other folks. Honestly, I mean, I think my personal foray into the metaverse, like it really had me immediately aligning with this sort of seemingly abstract metaverse idea to a very structured reality that I know very well, oddly enough, which is metadata. Or sometimes in DAM, we like to play with it. We call it metadata. I work with metadata every day to define every object and artifact in my work. And so for me as a librarian, archivist, and digital asset manager, metastructure is really something that is a familiar place where I like to exist, and it is safe for me, actually. And then beyond that, there is an incredible degree of imagination that goes into building spaces such as Afterville and Afterville archives here in the Origami verse, as we like to call it. If someone is able to allow themselves the imaginative space and freedom to envision what they would like to see here, then that something can be built with a very low barrier to entry. I was fortunate enough to be able to quickly conceptualize the value and importance of this new space of being, both for me, my family, and my new Afterville community. I quickly got to work embodying my avatar, I think, as we all did, and taking on the role of my very true me. If there were parts of my identity in which I wasn't confident, I took the very intentional approach of projecting where I wanted that identity to lie. And eventually it happened. So like over the past 2 years, I can't believe it's been that long already, I have built relationships here, like real friendships and creative relationships with persons on whose non-avatar faces I have never laid my IRL eyes. And I feel a true sense of connection and purpose with each and every one. I am a valid member of my Afterville and Origami community, which is growing every single day. We have new people coming in all the time, and that growth often takes shape in the folks who I've brought in from my IRL who are collaborating with me to envision other possibilities, either to advance what is already here or to create, I guess, something brand new. And every ounce of the imaginative work done here somehow manages to go back to increase life value in the universe, whether it plays out here or it plays out there. For me, this is my theory, sort of behind the sort of like the idea of this big bang behind the creation of our collective VR spaces. Like it's not a game for me. It's an experience. It's an identity, and it's a community. And we built it together, like to live, to work, to play. We exist in it. If I was going to tap into my inner philosopher, Jeanelle, I would say that we exist in it, therefore it is. Yeah, thank you for asking.
I love that. And so why don't we go around? Lonny, what about for you, since you're seated next to me? Tell us a little bit about your first step into the metaverse and what's kept you here.
Yeah, I think the first step here was being invited by Joe and Trisha and the Origami team to observe the building of Afterville and seeing that cohort vote on the decisions to build each structure. And for me, it kind of really synced with my natural role as an ethnographer, because that's what I do. I have been an ethnographer of the future with the Institute for the Future, observing them and what they do. So this is like a natural fit. So all of a sudden I find myself in a new world, literally a new future, seeing Afterville being built before my eyes. and then having that extraordinary moment when they were like, tell us about Afrofuturism. And I was like, okay. So we were in this roundabout wilderness where I was able to tell the tale of Afrofuturism. And so that was really exciting. And then becoming part of the First Nations Council of Afterville, and I adopted another persona called Serem, in terms of being the ancestral wisdom and channeling it through my new avatar at that moment. So that was just an extraordinary signal of possibilities. Like, oh my God, there's so much to do that we could do here. And so that was that special moment for me. And then like saying, calling Ahmed and say, hey, we got to try this. Let's get Oculus. You got to get the Quest 2 model. Let's do it.
It is weird to be mid-pandemic, and I feel like the Quest was spreading like a virus among our friends and peers in a similar way.
It's so funny. It's like you always want to try and get all of your friends to come in here with you. It's like you've got cool people, but come friends too. I've got maybe even a folk or two in the audience who we say drug them in here kicking and screaming, and now who will, I hope, never leave. Okay, so how about Jeanelle? Jeanelle, you're sitting here in the middle, and I feel like you're probably the person that I first really connected with when I came into our world build, and we were trying to look at the difference between Blockdown and Fire Escape. And so with that, you, like me, you're one of the first pioneers of Afterville. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like for you to enter into and then create space in the metaverse?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know what to expect, but I was ready to embrace this, for me, what's felt like an alternate reality and the better world that I hope that we can all create and build. And it felt like a safe space when I first met you, Fidget, when I met all the other pioneers, that we were all in the midst of a pandemic. I think we were all trying to find community, connection. We were missing that social element. And so when I came in, like I said, I was open to it. It was something new for me, out of my comfort zone, but I knew that I wanted to have a community somewhere. And I wanted to immerse myself in a whole new world, because at the moment, the pandemic, the awful racial injustices that were happening, I wanted to feel not necessarily like escaping our current reality, but I wanted to be in a place where I could re-envision and reimagine what could be. And that's something that's really near and dear to me personally, and to my research. I'm always thinking about who is not represented in that space, whose voice isn't being heard. And that's what I really wanted to bring to the metaverse. And for that reason, I say I'm the resident storyteller, but we're all really the storytellers here. We're all creating our own narratives. And I'm just the lucky one that gets to bring it all together and share them with the world, because I just want folks to feel in community with one another, and to know that their stories and their histories are all valid, they all matter, and that they're welcome in Afterville, certainly. And that they're preserved by our lovely, amazing archivists, of course.
You keep crafting the narrative, and I'll keep capturing it for the archive, right? And it's really like the starting point for what has been a really remarkable friendship, Jeanelle. I'm really grateful that you're with us today. So, also for Jeanelle, I wonder if we're talking about you as a resident storyteller, and specifically in regard to your proctoring of the annual Ghosts of Afterville, right? How might the virtual space have influenced your narrative programming in the physical space? Like, if we imagine this going the other direction, right? Tonight, we're really talking about coming into here. What about going back out to there? Has anything changed for you in that way?
Oh, that's a great question. No, it has. I I think because for those of you who aren't familiar, Ghosts of Afterville, the hope is to represent these stories from the past, present, and future. And it was very, it's just, it always reminds me to reflect on my past, and remember that it's what moves us forward right now and into the future. So since that's happened, I feel like in the quote unquote real world, I've really reconnected with my family members, and I want to listen more to their stories and experiences. And it's something like I hope one day I can write about, I can be more creative with, and just preserving those stories because I I know that the people I love and who are around me, they're not going to be there forever, but their stories will outlast, will live on forever. They'll outlast their lives, and it's reminding me to take note of that in my own self-reflexive way in journaling, but also to really listen to my loved ones and hear them out and know that their stories matter in our real world as well. That's a good question.
Yeah, I really relate to what you're saying about that. It's something that you know, we speak a lot sometimes. I don't know if we talk about it a lot here, but there is this thing, generational trauma, that can come through. And even in my own family, there have been efforts to um not just by me, but definitely including me and other people, like in my husband's family, who want to have an opportunity to re-envision how it might have been different, right? And actual efforts to write a different story. It's like, let's take this pain, let's take this trauma, but let's take this beautiful, gorgeous world that we're in, and let's reimagine how it might have been a little bit different, a little less painful, and a whole lot more loving. And some really, really cool things can come out of that when you play with that idea. So thank you so much for your answer. Yeah, I like that one. Okay, so let's see. We have something else here. What that we were that Patrick and I were talking about. We wanted to ask Justin, Ahmed, and Johnny. Um, and really, this is like we're super fortunate to have three meta visionaries here who have also worked in a more traditional medium of film. Um, and so we're wondering, could you talk about how the lessons you've learned in filmmaking sort of translate into this virtual experience? And can we learn from the history of filmmaking in particular, like who gets to create stories, the characters we do or do not see on screen, that we can use to ensure the metaverse is more authentically and fully inclusive? And any of you, please go dive into that.
You go first, Ahmed, or Ahmed?
Sure, I'll go first. I really love the possibilities in the metaverse, and I love the possibilities of building things and creating things from a pluralistic point of view. And I think hardest part about traditional film, the way we are constructing traditional film right now is we are still adhering to rules that are 100 years old. And there is a vested interest in the ideas of those films that prevents a lot of other storytelling to be made, especially storytelling by non-white people and storytelling that doesn't have to do with one hero, but the many heroes. You know, oftentimes I talk about moving from the hero with the faces to the faces of 1,000 heroes, and the faces of 1,000 heroes opens up storytelling to a plural verse that helps you recognize that no one is alone, no one gets there alone, and no hero does it by themselves. And this is a narrative that I think is embedded in the metaverse. It's a narrative that can become a part of the building of the metaverse, and I think it needs to. You know, there's a direct correlation between terraforming in real life and colonization. And the way terraforming happened, especially in the Americas, was to recreate places in Europe, which pretty much is what caused climate change. Right? Reason why we have climate change is because of that idea of terraforming, because of deforestation, because of killing off of indigenous peoples, killing off of indigenous wildlife, killing off of the ways indigenous people created food and fed their entire tribes and nations. We have to re-examine how all of that is built and find a way to build it in a way in which we all benefit from and tell those stories. And if we do that from the ground up in the metaverse, then the real world will have something to learn from us.
Right. Let me get some hearts in too. That was pretty incredible. Anybody else? You're free to answer the question or further what Ahmed is talking about, whatever you want.
I'll take a slightly different angle. So I came at this as a filmmaker, and so if you look back, is sort of tying it into the origin story as well. So if you look back at the history of film, right, there was a film in year 1900 or so filmed by the Lumiere brothers about a train that entered a station. People had never seen a living image before, and so when the train came toward them, jumped out of their seats and ran out of the theater because they thought they were going to get it, right? So 2016, I tried something called Evolution of Verse, which was my first virtual reality experience by Chris Milk. And in that, he kind of played with that idea, and there's a train coming around a lake, and it comes directly towards you. It comes at you. It shoots into a number of different birds. And so it's like, it was so impressive that I was like, wow, this is really incredible. And this is kind of taking storytelling to a new place, right? So the same experience that people had in 1900 for a 2D image, we are now having a fully immersive 3D image. And so I gave my mom, who, I put her head on and had her try it. And when the train came towards her, she literally threw the head stuff across the room. I was like, well, there we are. We're literally at the Lumiere Brothers moment again. And so for me, the idea, it's such an immersive tool, and an immersive tool that is, in my mind, will in time become powerful in a 2D image, in a 2D story, is that it allows you to get beyond sympathy and into really understanding. To sort of go back to Ahmed's point, you're able to really step into the shoes of another person and feel the experiences of what it's like to be somebody that's not you. So, before the metaverse and before this reality existed, we were sort of able to watch a movie and sort of, okay, now I intellectually understand that that's what it would have been like. Now we get to be it, and get to feel it, and it feels as though we are going through those experiences. So it can only help for understanding, empathy, and better understand plural points of view and different points of view.
All right. I love it. What do you think, Justin?
Well, where do I start?
Anywhere you want. Yeah, it's all fair game.
Well, I think, for me, my first introduction into meta prior to being here is getting introduced to VR and 360 and reprogramming my mind to see things in that 360 space, in that environment, and it really kind of expanded my vision where I don't have to see what's right in front of me. I can take the camera, my XR 360 camera, place it anywhere that I think looks really visually appealing, and just kind of wait for something to happen. And what's amazing about it, because it really gives me the opportunity to bring an audience to where I grew up. It gives me the opportunity to present the environment of, say, like in Concrete 49, the opportunity to go sit in on a drumming hand drum circle with some people, whether it be on the plains of North and South Dakota, or even in New York City. You could see that creative process happening before your eyes, but it also allows you to flip it around and see who's sitting on the other side of that hand drum or who's on the other side of the room. And I think that really kind of expands the visual presence for anybody to really kind of consider more than just what's directly in front of us. And for me, being a visual person, that's what I really I love and I dig, because I grew up watching films. Films were not only my escape and my entertainment, but they were like my chance to envision myself as being a different human being, a different hero, being somebody who could actually save the tribe, or somebody who could save the day, or somebody who could save my family, but really to present itself in a different, completely, entirely different format. Because, for me growing up, Bruce Lee was my guy, because I really identified him because he was the closest to being indigenous that I could visually, see being represented. Because at that time, you had a lot of John Wayne and everything going out, just laying natives to waste across, the expanse of the West, and so on and so forth. And the rest is history. But really, this is a great chance to expand that universe where it's not just about film. It's now about the metadata, the metaverse, and everything else that's encapsulated within the digital realm. Because that's where everything is going. That's where everything is gravitating. And everybody's, I think it's really going to expand, and the sky's the limit. And this is the entry point for, I believe, a lot of indigenous filmmakers and content creators, because it's something that's brand new, and it's absolutely amazing. I love it. It's powerful. It's a powerful medium. I don't know if I answered your question, but
any answer is a beautiful answer, and I've got two different directions I want to go from that. Like, you're talking about where we are right now and where this is headed, and I know that Johnny Android has a very firm philosophy about where this is headed in terms of the narrative. And did you want to say anything about that, Johnny?
In terms of the narrative, in what's how we're going to be telling stories, is that what you mean?
Yeah. Anything about the narrative? What's your philosophy?
My philosophy is certainly that in the same way we had a 2D image, we had a linear story. It was only being able to you by the writer and the director, which, don't get me wrong, is great. I love a good writer and director. My Meat Space still does a lot of writing and directing. I don't have anything against that. But I do think that the plurality of story will not only extend to character, but will extend, and you'll be able to have decision trees. You just where the plot is going to go. You experiencing more a holistic world as sort of like one of those sandbox worlds that you would play a game like a Zelda game or something like that. Well, or I guess Cyberpunk 2077, that just these worlds. I mean, we'll just be immersed in those, right? And so maybe choose to be one character one day and have certain decisions that you make, and then be another character another day and have a different decision tree and a completely different story that unfolds around you. You're interacting with different characters. Maybe those characters are real, and it's a multiplayer experience. But when we go a little bit further into the future, maybe 10, 20 years, talking about we're interacting with AI, we're interacting with characters designed to be able, in an intelligent way, communicate with and interact with you, that they can help guide you with you or double cross you or whatever. And so, but they're actually just NPCs, these non-player characters. And I can't imagine, I can't imagine a world where that doesn't become the focal point of culture. I can't imagine a world where we stay stagnant in the world that we're now in. Center of culture has been filmed for some time. I do think that this technology is something that's a little bit more advanced in terms of experience. and story. And so I'm just really excited to see where that goes. I love being a little bit of a part as much as I can. It's still rudimentary. So we're here. We look like cartoon characters. We don't
Yeah.
have feet. We don't have legs. Well, Patrick has half legs. He's got the good pants on, but we don't have arms. So it's super rudimentary at this stage. But for me, it's like you just have to come in here and then add 20% imagination to see where it's headed. And that's what I'm super excited about.
I know we had a conversation when we sat down before the show, and Ahmed was asking me about the possibility of this sort of progression of Avatar. What were you saying, Ahmed? Maybe you can say it better than me.
Yeah, I was talking about photorealism and how close we are to being able to create avatars that are more photorealistic. For me, it's like holodeck, right? That's where we're moving towards. We're moving towards Star Trek. And would it be possible to create these, environments and people in VR that feel like, real world, real life people? I don't have a moral opinion on that. I'm just wondering what that does to the experience. I'm of the I was part of the first iteration of the Oculus VR experience with one of my closest friends, Kamal Sinclair, used to run the Media Lab at Sundance, and she was the first person to just be like,
we love Kamal.
You have to check it. Yeah, that's my sister. Kamal and I have known each other for decades. Longer than she wants me to tell you, because I'm not going to out her age here in Afterville. But when I first jumped into the Oculus, I was like, this is it. This is where we're going. This is what's next, because I had the same experience. It was a space situation. But space situation was so emotionally impactful, because I've always wanted to go to space. I've always wanted to fly through space. And even having the ability, we didn't even have the handsets, right? We didn't have the triggers. It was just the headset, and you saw your virtual hands, right? But it was like a dream come true, flying through space. And space is kind of easy to recreate in VR, right? So I am just wondering, when we build photorealistic environments and photorealistic people, what that would do to us emotionally in real life, and how far are we away from that?
Absolutely. It's like, what does it mean to embody this avatar, and what does it mean to have the freedom to choose an avatar that's a little bit cartoony or a little bit realistic? And if we're in a place where we can choose either way, that's a place I want to be. But since we're talking about creating space is in space, Lonny, I'm kind of hoping that we can talk to you a little bit about your creative process, like coming from personal experience. I don't know how it is for 9key or Amy or Tilt or any one of us that's doing what we're doing, but I know that sometimes it can be, at least for me personally, like I said, a little bit isolating as an artist and a creator to be alone in a space where you are world building something. And I've found this to be the case, particularly when you're in there, you're trying to put stuff up, and you're fully immersed in a VR environment where your mind is like swirling in X, Y's, and Z's. And as I know, see, you know what I mean. Could you speak a little to your own creative process and those moments of sort of like fantastic disruption, I'll call it. Like this happened to me with my friend JT, who I believe is in the audience tonight. That moment of fantastic disruption when somebody unexpectedly just shows up in your space mid-creation. And I do know that this happened to you recently. What do you think about all that?
Oh yeah, well, that was, well, you mean Joe?
Yeah.
That's yeah. Well, one of the things that really has stimulated me is Afrofuturist art. So this being part of the Black Speculative movement, arts movement, has been amazing. So one of the folks in my network, Tana Wynn, has this beautiful painting called And Suddenly Froze, where she has this huge image of the mothership and someone trailing toward or guiding towards it. And it just stimulated this idea of, if we really made the mothership appear, in next to our ship, the Air Afrorhythm ship. And then with Ahmed's idea of an astro-egalitarian virtual nation, we'll get to that later. It's amazing. I mean, this whole idea of world building and embodying Afrofuturism in this world just seemed so amazing. And then, I started looking at spirituals, and the sighting of a Muamua that came into our solar system a couple of years ago. It was this, it looked like an asteroid, and it was having some mysterious properties. It looked like it was doing parasailing and using the sun to bounce outside of our solar system. Well, anyway, the idea of creating the mothership, I looked at spirituals like Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, and I wondered, well, what if we created Swing Low, Sweet Mothership? And your friend, Joe Wolf, said he would put music to that. And I was just like, whoa, that's just out of this world, literally.
Quite literally.
Yeah. And so, I was aboard the ship putting in an exhibition by Name Brown, who will see beautiful artwork. And all of a sudden, I'm resizing these images to be bigger than life that you could step into, and I hear someone say, anyone home? Anyone there? And I was like, oh my God. Is that you, Joe? He said, yeah. And I was like in the second level of our Air Afrorhythm ship. He was at the entrance, and I was like, okay, let me come up. So I felt like spectacularly surprised, like you're, I don't know, like you're in the bathroom or something.
Yeah.
Just,
it's a little jolting.
Surprised. And I was grateful to be interrupted at that moment, because he said he was coming on board to seek inspiration about Swing Low, Sweet Mothership, and the music that he was putting to our ships. We actually have his music as background music now on the ship.
Right. And
it's just amazing. So, I gave him a tour. I gave him a tour of Name's work we were doing aboard the ship, and even the tale of Ahmed's journey to creating the astro-egalitarian virtual nation concept as well. So it felt really great. Yeah. You gotta be careful with those images though, because they can blow up and you lose control of them. So anyway.
Next thing you know, they're bigger than the ship.
Yeah, exactly.
I was placing trees in the archives, and all of a sudden it was sort of like Alice in Wonderland. Did you take the big pill or the little pill? Or was it the crackers and the pills and the things that she consumes? And bloop, like there's this like 20,000 foot tree in the center of the archive sticking through the roof. So yeah, it's pretty funny. Thank you for sharing that. I know we'll be hearing a lot from Joe Wolf in our metafuture. And so let's see. I wanted to ask also, one other thing that's sort of similar to this. We asked earlier, Jeanelle, about bringing her creative self into or storytelling and narrative, and how that translates from her physical space into the meta space. And we really have a question for all of you that I sort of asked Jeanelle earlier, and anybody else can answer this. We want to know how it affects you the other direction. I think Ahmed and Johnny, you might have spoken on this a little bit, but or rather actually Justin. But I think that there's got to be some sort of influence when you're working in things that you're doing in the meta space all day or all weekend or a couple days here and there, and then it's like, oh my gosh, now I got to turn around and go, go do this other thing in my day job. Does anybody want to talk to that, the transition back?
Well, it really sucks that you can't fly when you get out of the Afterville. That's one of my favorite things to do when I'm here. I'm just like, oh, I can create. Let me just fly to the next place and do something else. So yeah, that definitely is a downer when you get back to the real world. But you know what's creating here? It's great to create in 3 dimensions. You know, most of what I do in film is for a 2-dimensional space, and my background is theater. And you know, I started as an actor in theater, and then I started as a director in theater. And so working in 3 dimensions in theater is kind of intuitive. So when I come to here, I really understand space here, you know. So
right.
And how to tell stories using space and place. And you know, this is kind of what I teach at USC as well. Is like where you place an object in space tells the story. And you know, when you stack elements on film, you're still dealing with a 2-dimensional distribution when visual distribution, right? So you can't really go deep into a scene without a camera. Right? On stage, it's a bit different, but you know, when you're immersive, and I've done a bunch of immersive plays as well, where I've walked people through the set, or actors popped up in the middle of the audience, and you know, or the entire audience gets moved. You know, I've done a lot of that. So this is kind of a natural progression from that 3-dimensional theater space, and it's really a pleasure to work in, because knowing that theater language makes it easier to move people through a narrative for me.
Nice.
It's really interesting. Yeah. So for me, you know, when I was so excited about first virtual reality, I immediately went to my writing and directing age. I wanted to do stuff, and they were like, "Are you crazy? It's just a gig. It's gonna die." And so what I did is I actually translated that into writing stories about. And so I actually find that this has become is sort of like a experimental story for ideas. I can take this as an inspiring well of interesting ideas, take those out of the real world into my meat space world, and then be able to craft. I think, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you did this, or wouldn't it be cool if that happened? I know Patrick's a writer. You can attest to this, that I was thinking about decision trees and things like that. Well, when you're writing, everything is a decision tree. Every time you're typing a new sentence, you are the creator of that next sentence. And so you're constantly facing choices as to how this story is going to go. You can, with writing, you can POVs as well. You can jump into different characters and kind of experience what they are. So it's all about that. It's a breeding ground for ideas and sort of experiment to learn and absorb and just fill up my imaginative wellspring again, and fill up my fountain of ideas, and go back into the other world and kind of try to express them in a different way.
Nice.
And you know, writers talk all the time about, you know, working alone, and then suddenly a character makes a decision that they didn't expect. But like your story, Lonny, in the metaverse, you get other people coming in and interrupting you and making decisions you wouldn't expect and throwing ideas at you, and that's such an exciting. I love that you're kind of connecting between immersive theater and film, and really this sort of like participatory theater. It's a little bit video games like Zelda, but other human beings are behind all those NPCs, bringing in astral blackness or ghost stories or other aspects of, you know, the kind of culture or speculative culture, just kind of putting a new spin on the story that we're all creating together.
Yeah, absolutely. I just remember being on the ship, the Air Afrorithms ship, and talking about so Trisha immediately took Katana Wynn's image of the mothership and put it out next to our Air Afrorithms ship, and then Data said, yeah, wouldn't that be cool if you could, you know, blow it up? And so all of a sudden it became bigger, and it was like, oh my God, it's approaching our ship. So it was such a great collaboration of minds at that moment, bringing our dreams collectively into space at the moment.
Yes.
It was amazing. It was such a tingling sensation of having that happen, you know?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was,
totally.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And
Yeah, and the inherent, I think, sci-fi nature of being here as well. You know, my career started in science fiction doing Star Wars, and you know, there was a lot of collaboration in that because you know that in those prequel movies, we were doing things that had never been done before in film,
Yeah.
and the collaboration process and the ideation process was really the most exciting part. You know, finding out how things were supposed to look, how they were going to move, how they were going to interact in space. So, I mean, the science fiction nature of just being in this space, even the fact that your camera people are blue, you can like take that out there and like mimic that in a story
Yeah.
where the people who the race of people who capture ideas have blue skin. I mean, things like that can just translate directly
Oh, look at that.
into the opposite way.
That is so cool. I love this idea.
When Lonny, you've mentioned a couple times working with Ahmed on some, I think, some pretty big ideas in the metaverse. Do you want to talk a little bit about, kind of what those are and where those are leading?
Yeah, we had this really great opportunity to do a video on the Astro Egalitarian Virtual Network or Nation that we call AVEN, for the Smithsonian Symposium on Black Futures, on claiming Black space in the future. And that was in January. And working with Ahmed on that, he really explained, I think, the origin story of that I think is so key to developing our idea around creating a safe space for Africana and indigenous diasporans. So, did you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, when it comes to we talked about with the Smithsonian, we drew the parallel between Henrietta Lacks and the HeLa cells that are pretty much used to make vaccines. Any vaccine that exists on the planet are tested on HeLa cells. They were immortal cells. And it was from a Black woman who had cervical cancer, and her name was Henrietta Lacks. However, as ubiquitous as her cells are and were, she nor her family ever received any compensation for it. And Johns Hopkins does not sell the HeLa cells. They hold it, but they don't sell the HeLa cells. But all of the vaccines that are made using HeLa cells are worth billions and billions of dollars. So this idea of, being the blueprint or being, DNA of these wonderfully, mind-blowing, earth-changing things never get back to, specifically the Black and indigenous people that have created. And I drew that parallel between me playing Jar Jar Binks and Henrietta Lacks. Every CGI character in major motion pictures has my cell in it. Because I was the first and because the software was written on my body, each iteration of that software still has me in it. I don't get any compensation for Thanos or for or for the Hulk or for the avatars. And it's this question of whether or not the value in being Black and indigenous and a creator is our value is being not only observed but protected, right? And where is that safe space? Do we have a safe space for that to exist is the question. And so what we're trying to create is a digital safe space to protect our coded cells, to protect our code. Who we are in the metaverse, because that question is never asked in the real world. And because this is a place where we can create from the ground up, we can ask that question and make sure those protections are in place, make sure those ideas are in place, and are shared throughout the metaverse in a way that is valuable to those who create.
Yeah.
It's such a profound idea, and such a great example. I mean, Lonnie, and you all know it's how much futurism is really rooted in a deep understanding of the past, and learning from that in shaping what the future could be. So I applaud you for this, what this could mean for Black and Indigenous creators in the generations to come.
Thank you, Patrick. I mean, there's a lot of conversation and talk about the metaverse co-opting who we are, co-opting our ideas, co-opting our identity, co-opting our likes and dislikes. And I think this idea is really stems from the fear of corporate power and corporate control. Because we are spending a lot of attention and time in this place, and because metadata is collected the way it's collected and sold the way it's sold, are we going to be co-opted by being in the metaverse for hours on end? That's a really important question that that has to be asked and debated, and it's an ethical question that has to be debated. But I do think that we can create things in here that can transfer out into the real world, to our meat selves, as Johnny says, to the real world, and that can teach us how to be better human beings. One of the really things that I love about Afterville is climate change is at the forefront of it, right? They're constantly talking about the climate crisis. And because we are creating with the idea of the climate crisis and the future of the climate crisis, when we get out of these headsets, we now talk about it in a way that's not only informed, but it's passionate because of the empathy generation of these headsets and our digital selves.
Yeah, absolutely. Just being able to think about this in a playful way too here. We have an imagination game called Afrorithms From the Future. It centers marginalized voices by looking at, how do we center them in code through the algorithms, and how do we go from algorithms of oppression to algorithms of liberation, I think is really important in terms of thinking about the metaverse as a pluriverse, as a plurality of voices that we can bring together in terms of creating this ongoing, graphic novel right here and now in this space, multimedia unlimited. So, yeah, really exciting.
Yeah, the only way out of the problems that we are in the real world is to story our way out. No amount of facts, no amount of convincing is going to get people to understand and realize where we need to be. The only way out is through our stories. How we put together these narratives. It is how we learn as human beings. The only way out is to story our way out. So it is our job as storytellers to make sure that these stories are created and told and realized and felt. In the past few days, I've been incredibly emotionally distraught over the murders that happened in Buffalo over the weekend. And a lot of it is because New York State is my home state. I have a lot of people whom I love who live in Buffalo, and any one of them could have been killed in that grocery store. And the thing that is bringing to the forefront for me is this idea that this delusion of white supremacy, this scourge of white supremacy, is a destructive force that does not work for anyone, regardless of your background, regardless of your ethnicity or nationality. It does not work for anyone. And it's finally coming into the mainstream. Lonnie and I have been saying this for a very long time, but when you finally hear, President Biden talk about how white supremacy is a scourge, then now it's finally in the zeitgeist. Now we can talk about it. Now it's out in the world as something that is detrimental to and antithetical to the human experience, not let alone the American experience, right? To the global experience. It is antithetical to our survival. Now we have these platforms in which we can tell these stories and have these empathy machines and these headsets in which we can recognize and get out there that into the world, whether we gamify it or whether we watch it, that this type of ideology and this type of thinking does not work. And it does not propagate what is who we are as human beings, which are loving, caring people who love our children, who love our families, who love one another as this family. Every biome on this earth is entitled to its dignity. And those are the stories that we have to start telling. And we can use this platform to tell it.
Incredible. Thank you, Ahmed. That was such important, just really important for us to hear right now, and really a beautiful way to, unfortunately, because we're running out of time here, wrap up our wonderful conversation and identity and community here in the metaverse. Really, thank you, Ahmed. That was a wonderful, wonderful statement. I would like to thank our panelists, each and every one, Johnny Android, Dr. Jeanelle Horcasitas, Justin Deegan, Ahmed Best, Dr. Lonny Avi Brooks, for making your way out here today for such an insightful and absolutely transparent conversation. And I look forward to continuing to live and work with each of you in our many plural multiverses. And an extra special thank you to my wonderful co-host, Patrick Coleman. It has been an absolute pleasure to imagine with you, Patrick, and the Clarke Center and Origami Air for this opportunity to explore such imaginative yet personal meta perspectives. And I really want to say a big thank you to you, the audience, both here in Afterville and out there in the MetaZoom. We love that you are here with us in our whatever verse. Thank you for coming out tonight. And until next time, fly safe and imagine well. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you to our hosts this week, Dion Fidget Surdez, as well as special guests, Johnny Android, Ahmed Best, Lonny Avi Brooks, Ryan Cantrell, Justin Deegan, Jeanelle Horcasitas, Garrett Oliver, Gordon Taylor, and Ivan Winkler. We'll see you next time, and until then, we ask you to consider, what do you want in your metaverse?